G'day Internet and welcome back to another video and to SepTandy. Yep, that's right, we're doing it again. So for the uninitiated, SepTandy is where a bunch of us on YouTube spend September celebrating all things Tandy and Radio Shack related. This year, Adrian Black and Tech Tangents are back, but we're also joined by, and I have a list, Mindflare Retro, Josh Malone's going to join us, the Retro channel, Jan Beater's going to throw a video in, Retro Spectre is going to join us, along with LGR. In today's video, we're going to take a look at my Color Computer 3, my Coco. Now, there's a reason you haven't seen this machine before, and that's primarily because it, well, works. There's never been a need to do any restoration or repairs on this machine. I got it, it was in great condition, and I've been enjoying it ever since. But there are a few upgrades we can give it, and some more modern conveniences. But before we get into that, let's take a little bit of a look at the history of the Coco. The Tandy Color Computer range was first released in 1980, based on a Motorola reference design with input from Tandy. So it sported a Motorola 6809 processor with Motorola graphics known as the VDU or Visual Display Generator and sound. It was a reasonably capable computer, first shipping with a choice of 4 or 16K of memory, but later having options for 32 or 64K. Video though was purely via RF. Its biggest issue probably though was the chiclet keyboard, which was never that great, and later Coco 1s had a modified version known as the melted keyboard that would be seen later in the Coco 2. Speaking of the Coco 2, it replaced the original model in 1983. For the most part, the Coco 2 was a re-engineering of the Coco 1 with much of the circuitry consolidated into a smaller mainboard, which also meant that the actual machine was shortened. The VDU also got a tweak and it also got composite video output. But it's the Coco 3 where we really see some significant changes. Released in 1986, the Coco 3 had a much improved keyboard and came standard with 128K of RAM, upgradable to 512. But the biggest change was to the video and memory management. Gone was the old VDU and in its place came the new Gimme chip. It gave the Coco 3 up to 16 simultaneous colors and resolutions up to 640 pixels wide. The processor also had the ability to run at twice the speed of that in the Coco 1 and Coco 2, which the operating system, OS 9, could take advantage of. The Coco 3 stayed in production until 1991. Now, like all Tandy and Radio Shack products, they were all sold through Tandy and Radio Shack stores, which is good and bad. The good is that simply they had an existing chain of retailers ready to sell their computer. The downside is, and if you know anything about Tandy and Radio Shack stores, is that they only sell Tandy and Radio Shack products. So when it comes to software, you're never going to see Activision or any of those other third-party developers, and a computer is only ever as good as its software. But there were some exceptions. Parker Brothers got involved and Tandy did a lot of internal development, porting games from other developers. But that's enough about the history. Let's get on to some upgrades. The first one we're going to do is that 512K memory upgrade that I talked about. So let's take a look at that. So with the screws already out, it's just a simple case of taking the cover off, and then we're going to undo the ribbon cable for the keyboard and lift it away, and we're into the main board. As you can see here, this is the standard 128K of RAM. It's just these 4 chips here. So we're going to start by removing those. We're out, I think. Bit of foam. And that's goodbye to the original 128K of RAM. Now, there's 2 capacitors that we need to snip. Now, on this various revisions of this main board, and the capacitors tend to move around a bit, but they're always labelled the same thing, and that's C66 and C65. And on this particular revision, they're just down here. So let me grab some snippers and we can snip these out. And all I do is just simply, all I've done is simply break a leg and move them out of the way, and they're just here. So with that done, we can now bring in our 512K expansion board. Now this I actually got off from Ian from The Right Stuff in Melbourne, who's basically Australia's TRS-80 guru. He actually sent me this as a kit and I built it and then promptly lost all the footage. So apologies for that, Ian. But if you have a look on the board here, you've got a series of pin headers, and this just simply goes into those headers like that. And we're done. That's it. That's the entire memory upgrade on the Coco 3. But while we're in here, we're going to do one other upgrade, and that's this. This here is an Hitachi 6309 processor. It's a CMOS variant of the original Motorola 6809. It runs faster. It also has expanded instruction set and registers, but is completely backwards compatible with the original 6809, and it's a very common upgrade for the Coco 3. So let's get this in there. This is the processor just here, right next to the cartridge slot, and we should be able to easily lever this out. And come on, there we go. Now, quick note, the processor is normally soldered into the board. I have already gone ahead and socketed that. I did that actually a while ago, but it's a case of desolder the chip and solder in a socket. And now we can take our 6309, straighten the legs in the usual fashion, and this should just drop straight in. Check those legs. Make sure we haven't got any legs going in the wrong direction. Might just straighten them out a little more. Bend them in. One more go. And we're in. One easy CPU upgrade. With our internal upgrades done, it's now time to talk video. This comes with RF and composite out, so you could plug it into any old television, or if you're lucky enough, you might stumble across the original CM8 RGB monitor that was released specifically for the Coco 3. I'm lucky enough to own one, but as far as I can tell, they're rare as hen's teeth. So what else can you do to get decent video in the modern age out of a Coco 3? Well, currently in development is a upgrade to the Gimme chip called the Gimme X. Unfortunately, it's still in beta testing at the moment, let alone trying to get one here to Australia, but that is coming. But right now, your best bet is probably to make up a SCART cable. Now, this is a cable I made up a while back, and it works fine. You've got to run a couple of extra cables out of the motherboard to get composite sync, but it works. And as a small design choice, I 3D printed this small box, and this is where all the extra circuitry goes, like the capacitors and resistors and so forth. And this sits beautifully under the machine in a little cutout that's there right next to the RGB output. And with this, we can plug it into a modern television if it's got SCART, or run it through a modern upscaler, and you can plug it into anything. Now, I've just got this running through one of these cheap little upscalers that a bunch of us use, but the video quality is actually pretty good. What I'll do is I'll actually put a link to the spec that I used to make this SCART cable down in the description. and maybe you can make your own. So that's the video options as it currently stands. Until the Gimme X is made available after testing, SCART is probably your best option. Now, what about media, actually getting programs and games onto your Coco 3? Well, there's a bunch of options, so we'll start from the very beginning, and that would be cassette. Here is a Radio Shack cassette player. It's slow, but it works, and you load your cassette in and you load your programs and away you go. But there is a modern version of this. There's various other similar devices like this, like the Tapwino, but this is a new one called the SVI-CAS. It's actually primarily designed for the Spectra video range of computers, but it is also compatible with the Spectrum and the Tandy Coco. But this is actually going to be the subject of a video probably next month. From there we move to disk. Now, if you can find one, this is the original floppy drive interface for the Coco. But there are modern versions of these available, modern reproductions. And for this, you can simply plug in a GoTech and load up disk images. And the computer just figures it's talking to a disk drive and away you go. But what seems to be the standard among the community is the Coco SDC, which is a SD card based cartridge with its own software built in, and you simply plug this in, turn it on and select your software and away you go. So let's take a closer look at this guy. Now this really couldn't be any easier. You have your Coco SDC and you've got an SD card. The SD card is simply formatted FAT32 and there's an image on the Coco archive, which I'll put a link to down in the description. But it's not an image like like a Raspberry Pi image. It's simply a zip file and you copy everything across. And this simply goes into the Coco SDC upside down, I should point out. God knows I've done that enough times. Plug it in and turn on your Coco, and it will boot straight into SDC Explorer, which is kind of cool. And you've got your directories down the side, and if it is a normal disk image like Gunstar here, you press across and you select whatever the boot file happens to be. This one uses a basic bootloader, but if you go to, say, one of the Sierra games here, and let's go down to King's Quest 3, which is a disk image, but you'll see here it says OS 9 disk, and what it will do is if you hit enter, it will boot straight into OS 9, and then you simply run whatever the start command is for that game, and we're into King's Quest 3. Seeing as we've gotten this far, let's take a look at a few games. Now, I'm going to cover some of the classic Coco games, but also some of the more modern stuff. The first couple of games we're going to check out are some early ones. We'll start off with Frogger, which is a favourite of mine, and of course Arkanoid, which got ported to pretty much everything. Later on with the Coco 3, Sierra got involved and we got some of their classic adventure games like King's Quest and Leisure Suit Larry. And finally, some really impressive modern games, both from Nick Marenti's. We've got Popstar and Gunstar. So there you go, there is my Coco 3 with its SCART video and its few upgrades and a nice modern SD card media solution. And together it makes a really, really great machine. And I'm more than happy to have it in my collection and it gets quite a bit of use. I do like this machine. So if you liked the video, click like, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. You can also now find me on Patreon if you would like to support the channel. And keep your eye out for the rest of the SepTandy videos from all the other YouTube creators. And I will see you in the next one.